Well, folks, I'm going to be reading you an article from the New York Times because this story went completely past me. And I think it's very important that we bring it up and we talk about it because there was a pretty disturbing ruling from the Supreme Court that will now allow ICE officers to racially profile people. And that is a direct violation of the Fourth Amendment. But when I say words and phrases like shredding the Constitution, I don't know any other way to say it. I want to make one thing clear because I hear a lot of people in the media and I hear a lot of politicians and a lot of MAGA saying that it was people like us using words like authoritarian or people like us using words like fascism that led to violence. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think those things themselves is what led to the violence. And so I always want to make sure that people understand where I'm coming from. And I'm not just using these words to throw them around loosely. I'm throwing them out there because by definition that's what they are. So before we read this article from the New York Times, I just want to remind you of what the definition of authoritarian is. Authoritarian is favoring strict obedience to authority, especially at the expense of personal freedom. So we're going to be reading an article here about how the Supreme Court ruled that people's personal freedom would be taken away and overlooked. Fascism, by definition, is a governmental system led by a dictator, having complete power, forcibly suppressing opposition and criticism, regimenting all industry, commerce, etc., and emphasizing an aggressive nationalism and often racism. I'm going to be quoting these definitions more as we go forward because it's always, well, you called us that. Well, only because this story I'm reading you in this ruling mirrors that. That's the only reason. So I want to bring this article up here from the New York Times and explain this ruling. So the Supreme Court decision on ICE and racial profiling explained. I can't believe, first of all, folks, that we live in a world 2025 where I'm actually reading a headline where it says racial profiling explained, but that's where we're at. The ruling allowed immigration agents to stop people for reasons that lower courts had deemed likely unconstitutional. So the Supreme Court on Monday overturned a federal judge's order that prohibited federal agents in Los Angeles from stopping people and questioning them about their immigration status based solely on factors like their ethnicity. The ruling is not the final word in the case, which stems from the Trump administration's attempt to carry out mass deportations. But the court's Republican-appointed majority will allow the government to continue using aggressive and unconstitutional, in the eyes of critics, tactics in immigration sweeps as the litigation slowly plays out. Here's a closer look. What does the ruling mean? So for now, federal agents in Los Angeles carrying out immigration crackdown can continue to decide which people to stop and at least briefly detain for questioning based solely on one or a combination of four factors that the lower court judge had deemed unconstitutional. Those factors are people's apparent race, the fact that they speak English or with an accent or speak Spanish, their presence at particular locations like farms or pickup sites for the day laborers, and the type of work that they do. For the Trump administration, that means federal agents can make stops to carry out the immigration crackdown without the potential chilling effect of fearing they could be accused of violating a court order or held in contempt. For American citizens of Hispanic descent in Los Angeles, especially people who speak with an accent or work as manual laborers, that means they will continue the risk of being stopped and questioned whenever they go out. They may see it as a necessary precaution to carry documents with them in a way that other Americans need not to. So, before I move on, before I roll on into the next segment of this article, folks, America has always been a melting pot of people. And somehow or another, MAGA completely lost the plot on the American dream and people coming to this country to make a better way for themselves. And shout out to the I've Had It podcast because I heard Jennifer Welch talking about how that if you triple Trumped, if you voted for him 3 times, you shouldn't get to enjoy the different cultures that are here in this country. You really shouldn't get to go out and enjoy these restaurants that you go out and enjoy if you've been against these people every step of the way. This ruling is not it's always done under the guise of we're trying to come after the criminals and the gang members, but it's always the innocent people. It's always the people who came here to make a better way for themselves, and also American citizens born in this country who happen to speak with an accent who are paying the price. But what is this case about? Let's move on with this article. Under the Fourth Amendment, government agents may not stop and detain people without reasonable suspicion that there is a legal basis to do so. A large-scale effort to round up undocumented migrants living in the Los Angeles area has raised the question of whether the Trump administration is violating that restriction. Since June, the Trump administration has used roving patrols of armed, masked federal agents to carry out the sweeps. The agents have detained people for questioning about their legal status, targeted apparent day laborers at a Home Depot, parking lots, and workers at places like farms, car washes, and construction sites. And remember all the time that MAGA said, oh, they're just coming after the violent criminals. There was a friend of mine that lives in Kentucky that told me about a guy whose entire lawn mowing crew got taken away. And he was a Trump supporter, and he couldn't believe it. He thought it was just the violent people that they were coming after. Well, you got what you voted for. It looks like we listened to Trump more than you did. A civil rights organization and several U.S. citizens who had been stopped and questioned filed a lawsuit seeking a class action status. They accused the federal agents of engaging in blatant racial profiling by carrying out indiscriminate immigration operations with no individualized basis for suspicion. For now, the issue is what should happen as litigation slowly plays out. Should federal agents be stopped from using such tactics in the interim, or should they be permitted to continue using them unless and until there is any final judgment? I can't believe we're even asking that question out loud. It's crazy to me that we're here. But what did the lower courts say? In July, a federal district court judge in Los Angeles held that it is strongly likely that the federal agents are violating the Fourth Amendment by stopping people without reasonable suspicion. She issued a temporary restraining order tying the hands of federal agents while the litigation continued. Her order specifically barred the federal government from stopping and detaining people in Los Angeles based solely upon a combination of four factors: ethnicity, language, location, and the type of work they were performing. In August, a three-judge panel of U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit declined to block the order. The Trump administration's Solicitor General, Dr. D. John Sayer, sought an emergency intervention from the Supreme Court. He argued that hanging the prospect of contempt out of every investigative stop and suspected illegal aliens would upend the government's ability to enforce immigration laws in the U.S. Now, what was the Supreme Court's reasoning? In allowing the Trump administration to keep doing what it wants for now, the majority as a whole did not issue a ruling explaining its decision. But one of its 6 members, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, filed a 10-page concurring decision. He concluded that the plaintiffs probably lacked standing, but also addressed to the substance of their concerns, saying tactics are not likely to violate the Fourth Amendment. Weighing what was reasonable, Justice Kavanaugh said that agents must be allowed to rely on their experience in dealing with the problem that millions of foreign people are unlawfully living in the United States. He portrayed the harm to people who are stopped and questioned despite being lawfully in the United States, including citizens, as modest. And he wrote, as for stops of individuals who are legally in the country, the questioning in those circumstances is typically brief, and those individuals may promptly go free after making clear to the immigration officers that they are U.S. citizens or otherwise legally in the United States, he wrote. But we have seen people sent out of this country without due process, and no one bats an eye, and no one cares. But for all the people that wants to talk about the tyrannical government, how would those white people feel if they were being stopped because they were white? And how would people living where I'm living feel if they were stopped for having a southern accent? It's so easy for people to look over at another group of people that they either don't like, don't understand, or just flat out hate. It's easy to look over at them and say, well, that's just, they're just doing their job. Let the law enforcement do their job. But I have a feeling if the roles were reversed, because MAGA couldn't even lose an election if they didn't raise hell. So I can't imagine what would happen if they were being stopped everywhere they went and they were being sent out of this country without due process. I can't imagine what they would be saying. But this is a very disturbing ruling to me, and I understand that people have to do their job, but this idea now that everyone needs immunity in order to be able to do it, it paves the way for authoritarianism. And by definition, what is authoritarianism? Favoring strict obedience to authority, especially at the expense of personal freedom. So to anyone that says, well, I don't know if I would refer to that ruling as authoritarian, that ruling, a lot of people say, went against the Fourth Amendment. That ruling is favoring strict obedience to authority, especially at the expense of personal freedom. There are people born in this country every day with an accent, and there's people born in this country every day. I can't believe I'm having to say this out loud in 2025. But there's brown people being born every day. I know that's hard for MAGA to believe. I can't believe we're here. I can't believe we're having to have these conversations, but we're just going to keep talking about it, and I'm always going to have the definitions here so people understand that I'm not calling these things to try to turn up the temperature. I'm actually trying to bring down the temperature by explaining to everyone what these words actually mean, and then you can be the judge for yourself as to who's turning up the temperature in the room. I always go to the top and I look at the president's Truth Social post, and I see pictures, AI pictures of him saying Chicago about to learn about war, and I think that's turning up the temperature. But that's just me. According to them, I'm a radical for thinking that. But I do want to thank y'all so much for your support here on the channel. We're cruising toward 1 million subscribers. I hope we can get there by the end of the year. I do believe we can with your help. I really appreciate all of you for coming along on this wild and crazy ride with me. One of my heroes behind me here, Hunter Thompson, said, buy the ticket, take the ride. We got the ticket. This ride is bumpier than hell. And I have read every book he ever wrote, and more than once. And I have read about some of his drug-addled escapades. And I tried my damnedest to live up to some of them and experience them for myself. And I can tell you that the whole line the Grateful Dead said about what a lone, strange trip it's been, they never had a trip in their life as strange as the one that we're on right now. This has absolutely been the longest, strangest trip of my life. I've been drinking water. I've been drinking vitamin C. I've been trying to come down off this ride. We're still here. Not trying to make light of it, not trying to make a joke. I know I got a dark sense of humor, but fuck, we got to find a way at some point to take a deep breath, have a laugh when we can possibly find one, and keep moving forward, because Jerry Garcia, I hope you made it to the other side, and I hope it's just nothing but peace, love, and harmony. I hope it's a summer of love wherever you're at. But boy, you never seen a strange trip until you live through 2025 America.